My name is Callie Ryn, and I grew up believing I was the problem. In our pristine suburban home with the perfect lawn and matching shutters, I was the shadow while my brother Nathaniel was the blazing sun. Every family photo showed him front and center, arms spread wide with that charming smile, while I stood slightly behind, hands folded, looking like I was apologizing for existing. My parents never said I was unwanted, but their eyes always found him first. Their laughter always followed his jokes. Their pride always swelled for his achievements. I was the good girl who never caused trouble, which apparently meant I deserved no attention at all. The dinner table conversations revolved around his soccer victories, his honor roll certificates, his plans for student government. When I tried to share something from my day, Mom would nod absently while folding laundry, and Dad would mumble, "That's nice, sweetheart," without looking up from his phone. I learned early that my voice was background noise in the symphony of Nathaniel's life. What I didn't realize then was that being invisible would eventually become my greatest strength. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who never see you coming. The night everything changed was supposed to be perfect. I was 16, finally old enough to attend Nathaniel's friend Marcus's party. I'd begged Mom for weeks to let me go, promising to stay close to my brother and be home by midnight. She reluctantly agreed, probably thinking it would make me stop pestering her. I spent hours getting ready, choosing my outfit carefully, hoping to finally fit in with the cool kids who always seemed just out of reach. When we arrived, the house pulsed with music and laughter. I felt nervous, but excited, like maybe this was my chance to step out of the shadows. Nathaniel immediately disappeared into the crowd, leaving me to navigate the party alone. I didn't mind. I was determined to prove I belonged. But as the night wore on, I noticed people staring at me, whispering behind their hands, giggling when they thought I wasn't looking. My stomach twisted with anxiety. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. Then Marcus cornered me by the kitchen, his breath reeking of beer, and asked if the rumors about me were true. My blood turned to ice. What rumors? His smirk told me everything I needed to know. Someone had been spreading lies about me, and the whole school believed them. The ride home was torture. I sat in the passenger seat of Nathaniel's car, tears streaming down my face, waiting for him to ask what was wrong. Instead, he laughed. "You should have seen your face when Marcus asked about those pictures," he chuckled, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. "What pictures?" I whispered, but he just shook his head like I was playing dumb. My chest felt like it was caving in. There were no pictures because nothing had happened, but somehow everyone at the party believed there were. Someone had created elaborate, humiliating lies about me and spread them through the entire school. When I asked who would do something so cruel, Nathaniel's silence was deafening. At home, I rushed to my parents' bedroom, sobbing as I explained what had happened. Mom sat on the edge of the bed in her robob, sighing like I'd interrupted something important. "Honey, kids say mean things sometimes. You're probably just being dramatic." Dad didn't even look up from his laptop. "High school drama doesn't matter in the real world, sweetheart. Just ignore it." But ignoring it felt impossible when every face at school would now look at me differently. As I walked to my room, I heard Nathaniel's voice drifting from downstairs. "She's always looking for attention." That was the moment something inside me broke and rebuilt itself harder. Just before you continue to watch this video, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage and help us keep creating amazing content for you. All right, back to the story. My notebook was my lifeline. In its lined pages, I poured out everything I couldn't say aloud. My dreams of studying journalism in college, my fears about never being good enough, my secret plan to save money and leave this suffocating house behind. I wrote about the way Mom's eyes glazed over when I tried to talk to her about my day, how Dad's hugs felt obligatory rather than loving, how Nathaniel's presence seemed to dim everyone else's light. The notebook lived under my mattress, the only place that felt truly private in a house where my bedroom door didn't have a working lock. Writing became my therapy, my rebellion, my hope. On particularly difficult days, I'd sketch out timelines of when I could graduate, when I could apply to colleges far away, when I could finally breathe freely. I detailed small victories like getting an A on my English essay or making the varsity debate team, achievements that went unnoticed at home but felt monumental to me. The pages also held my anger, carefully worded descriptions of every slight, every dismissal, every moment I felt erased. I didn't know why I was documenting everything so meticulously, but some instinct told me these words might matter someday. The notebook was proof that I existed, that my thoughts and feelings were real, even if no one else seemed to notice. The morning I discovered my notebook was missing, my world tilted sideways. I'd reached under my mattress for my usual before-school writing session, but my fingers found only dust and carpet fibers. Panic seized my chest as I tore apart my room, checking every drawer, every corner, every possible hiding place. The notebook had simply vanished. At breakfast, my family sat around the table like nothing had happened. Dad read the newspaper, Mom scrolled through her phone, and Nathaniel ate his cereal with theatrical enthusiasm. I watched their faces carefully, searching for any sign of guilt or knowledge, but they all seemed perfectly normal. "Has anyone seen a notebook?" I asked casually, my heart hammering. Mom barely glanced up. "Check your backpack, honey." But I knew it wasn't in my backpack. I knew exactly where I'd hidden it. During dinner that evening, Nathaniel suddenly cleared his throat with exaggerated importance. "So, I was thinking about that time Callie wrote that she wanted to run away and join the circus because we're all emotionally unavailable monsters." He used air quotes and spoke in a high-pitched voice meant to mimic mine. The whole table erupted in laughter. My face burned with humiliation and rage. Those were my private words, written during a particularly difficult week when I felt completely alone. Nathaniel continued quoting my most vulnerable thoughts, twisting them into punchlines while my parents giggled like he was performing stand-up comedy. That Christmas morning, I woke up with hollow hope in my chest. Maybe today would be different. Maybe this year they'd see me. The living room glowed with twinkling lights and perfectly wrapped presents arranged under our enormous tree. Nathaniel's pile of gifts towered like a small mountain: new gaming equipment, expensive clothes, and an envelope that I later learned contained car keys. My stack was notably smaller, but I told myself that quality mattered more than quantity. I unwrapped each gift with forced enthusiasm: a pack of generic socks, a discount store journal to replace the one Nathaniel had stolen, and a gift card to a restaurant I'd never expressed interest in visiting. My parents watched expectantly, waiting for my gratitude. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the disappointment crushing my ribs. But it wasn't perfect. It was a collection of thoughtless afterthoughts, gifts that screamed, "We forgot about you until the last minute." When my Aunt Linda arrived for dinner, she pulled me aside in the hallway. "You look sad, sweetheart. Everything okay?" Before I could answer, Mom emeralized with her bright hostess smile. "Oh, you know Callie. She loves to sulk during the holidays, always wants to be the center of attention." The adults chuckled knowingly, and I felt myself disappearing again. But this time I didn't cry. I watched. I memorized their faces, their casual cruelty, their complete inability to see my pain. If they wanted to treat me like I was invisible, maybe it was time to use that invisibility as a weapon. College became my escape plan, and I attacked it with desperate determination. I spent every free moment researching schools across the country, places where no one would know my family's name or expect me to live in Nathaniel's shadow. My grades were excellent, had always been excellent, but my parents barely noticed. While they bragged to neighbors about Nathaniel's soccer scholarship offers, I quietly submitted applications to journalism programs in California, New York, and Oregon. The day my acceptance letter arrived from State University, 3,000 miles away, I clutched it to my chest like a lifeline. Finally, I could breathe. But the celebration was short-lived. At dinner, when I announced my acceptance, Dad's expression darkened. "That's awfully far away, Callie, and expensive. We'd have to really think about whether we can afford to send you there." My stomach dropped. Nathaniel's college fund had been discussed openly for years, but apparently my education was still up for debate. Mom pursed her lips. "Maybe you should consider community college first. Stay close to home." Their words felt like a cage snapping shut, but I refused to be trapped. That night, I researched student loans, work-study programs, and part-time jobs. If they wouldn't support my dreams, I'd find another way. I started working double shifts at the local diner, saving every penny and avoiding every family gathering. Each dollar earned was a step to freedom, towards a life where my voice might actually matter. The phone call came on a Tuesday night in October. I was in my dorm room, finally settled into college life and loving every moment of independence, when Mom's number flashed across my screen. Her voice was different, smaller, shakier than I'd ever heard it. "Callie, honey, you need to come home. Your father's in the hospital." My textbook slipped from my hands. Despite everything, the thought of losing Dad made my chest tight with panic. "What happened? Is he okay?" The story came out in fragments. Chest pains, emergency room, tests, uncertainty. I booked the first flight home, my hands trembling as I packed. During the entire journey, I replayed every harsh word, every dismissed conversation, wondering if I wasted too much time being angry. Maybe family really was all we had, despite their flaws. Maybe this crisis would finally bring us together. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and false hope. Dad looked small in his hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped rhythmically. When he saw me, his face lit up with genuine warmth. The first time I'd seen that expression directed at me in years. "There's my smart girl," he whispered, and for a moment, I forgot about all the pain. Nathaniel and Mom flanked his bed like sentries, their faces etched with worry. For the first time in my life, we felt like a real family facing something terrible together. I should have known it was too good to last. The paperwork appeared the next morning like a trap I never saw coming. Nathaniel cornered me in the hospital cafeteria, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. "Dad needs you to sign some things," he said casually, sipping his coffee. "Just financial stuff. Power of attorney forms, loan documents, that kind of thing." My instinct screamed danger, but guilt clouded my judgment. Dad was sick, maybe dying, and here I was hesitating to help him. The documents were dense with legal language I didn't fully understand, terms like cosigner, joint liability, and personal guarantee swam before my tired eyes. When I asked for time to read everything carefully, Mom appeared at my shoulder. "Sweetheart, the lawyers need these back today. It's just paperwork to help Dad manage his medical bills." Nathaniel nodded earnestly. "We're all signing them. It's just to make sure Dad gets the treatment he needs." But when I looked closer, I noticed that his signature appeared nowhere on the documents, only spaces for mine and my parents'. Something felt wrong, but my father's pale face haunted me from his hospital bed upstairs. "Family helps family," they said. "Good daughters don't abandon their parents in crisis," they said. So I signed my name on line after line, each signature feeling like a small betrayal of my own intuition. Within hours, I discovered exactly how much those signatures would cost me. The first sign of disaster came through my banking app. I was back at college, trying to focus on midterm exams, when my phone buzzed with an alert. Account balance minus $2,847.32. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. How was this possible? I'd been so careful with money, working extra shifts and eating ramen for weeks to build up my savings. Frantic calls to the bank revealed the truth. My name was now attached to multiple loans I'd never applied for, credit cards I'd never requested, and medical bills that somehow belonged to me. The papers I'd signed in my moment of family loyalty had made me legally responsible for debts I didn't even know existed. My parents' phone calls became less frequent, and when I did reach them, they sounded different. Evasive, uncomfortable, almost guilty. "It's just temporary," Mom assured me. "Once Dad gets better and back to work, we'll sort everything out." But Dad's recovery seemed to stretch indefinitely, and my debt continued growing like a cancer. I stopped sleeping through the night, jolting awake to check my phone for new financial disasters. My grades began slipping as anxiety consumed my ability to concentrate. The life I'd worked so hard to build was crumbling, and I felt powerless to stop it. My boss at the campus bookstore noticed my distraction during a particularly difficult shift. "Callie, you look exhausted. Is everything okay at home?" For the first time since the hospital visit, I told someone the truth. The relief of speaking those words out loud was overwhelming, but it also marked the beginning of my fight back. Lisa, my boss at the bookstore, listened to my story with growing concern. When I finished explaining the financial trap my family had sprung, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. "Honey, that's not family love. That's financial abuse." The term hit me like a slap. I'd never heard those words together before, but they perfectly described what had happened to me. Lisa pulled out her phone and showed me articles about adult children being manipulated into taking on family debt, about parents who used guilt and crisis to exploit their kids financially. "This happens more than you'd think," she said gently, "but you don't have to live with it forever." She introduced me to a concept that would change everything: documentation. She advised, keep records of everything. Every text message, every email, every phone call. Paper trails don't lie, and someday you might need them. That night, I created a new email folder labeled Family Financial Issues and began forwarding every message from my parents about money. I screenshotted my bank statements showing the mysterious charges and saved voice messages where they promised to fix everything soon. It felt strange, almost paranoid, to be collecting evidence against my own family. But as the evidence pile grew, a clearer picture emerged of systematic manipulation and lies. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was being used, and now I had proof. My birthday had always been an afterthought in my family, squeezed in between the family's soccer tournaments and my parents' social obligations. This year, turning 21, felt different, like crossing a threshold into real adulthood. I almost didn't go home for the celebration, but Mom's pleading voice on the phone convinced me to make the trip. "Please, sweetheart, we need to be together as a family right now." The house looked the same as always, perfectly maintained and showroom ready. Dad was out of the hospital now, looking healthier but somehow smaller than before. They'd prepared a dinner of all my supposed favorites, though I noticed they'd forgotten I'd been vegetarian for 3 years. The cake was the final insult: chocolate with peanut butter frosting, despite knowing I was allergic to peanuts. When I politely declined a slice explaining about my allergy, Mom's face twisted with exasperation. "Oh, Callie, you're always so difficult about food. It's just a little peanut butter." Nathaniel laughed. "She's probably faking the allergy for attention anyway." Dad chuckled along. "Your sister has always been dramatic about these things." I sat there watching them eat my birthday cake that could literally send me to the hospital, listening to them mock my medical condition, and something crystallized inside me. They didn't just ignore me. They actively erased me. But this time, my phone was recording everything from my purse on the counter. Every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every moment of casual cruelty was being preserved. They had no idea they were creating the evidence that would eventually destroy them. The morning after my birthday disaster, I was sitting in my old room when Mrs. Hoffman from next door knocked on our front door. She was ancient, probably 80, but her mind was sharp as a blade. Mom invited her in for coffee, and I could hear her conversation drifting up the stairs. "How is Callie doing in college? She's always been such a bright girl." Mom's response made my blood freeze. "Oh, you know Callie. She's struggling quite a bit. We're having to bail her out financially because she can't manage her money properly. It's been really stressful for the whole family." I crept to the top of the stairs, phone in hand, recording every word. Mrs. Hoffman's voice sharpened with concern. "That doesn't sound like the Callie I know. She's always been so responsible." But Mom was just getting started, painting a picture of me as a reckless, ungrateful daughter who was bleeding the family dry. Everything was backwards. I was the victim of their financial manipulation, but she was telling neighbors that I was the problem. After Mrs. Hoffman left, I confronted Mom about the lies. She barely looked up from washing dishes. "People ask questions, Callie. I have to tell them something." When I pressed her about the truth, she turned on me with surprising venom. "The truth is that you've been nothing but a burden since you left for college. Maybe it's time you took some responsibility for your choices." That night, I called Lisa from my bookstore job. "I need help.
I whispered into the phone. I need to know how to fight back. Her response was swift and clear. It's time to talk to a lawyer.
The family dinner confrontation was my idea. Sarah had advised waiting until all our legal documents were prepared, but I wanted to give my parents one chance to make things right before we destroyed their lives in court. I called Mom and told her I was coming home to discuss our financial situation as a family. She sounded nervous, but agreed. The dining room felt different that evening, charged with tension I'd never experienced before. Dad carved the roast while Mom fussed with side dishes, both of them performing normalcy while avoiding my eyes. Nathaniel was there too, lounging in his chair like he owned the world. They made small talk about weather and neighbors until I finally set my manila folder on the table between us. I think it's time we talked honestly about money, I said calmly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad's carving knife paused mid-slice. Mom's smile became brittle. Only Nathaniel seemed unconcerned, still scrolling through his phone. I opened the folder and spread out bank statements, loan documents, and printed emails like I was dealing cards. I've been documenting everything, I said quietly. Every lie, every manipulation, every dollar you've stolen from me. Dad finally looked up, his face flushing red. Stolen? That's a strong word, Callie. We're family. But I was ready for that argument. I'd practiced the speech in front of my mirror for weeks. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't lie about medical emergencies to trick someone into debt. Family doesn't mock their daughter's allergies at her birthday party. The silence that followed was deafening. The explosion of denials and accusations that followed my revelation was exactly what I'd expected. Dad slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. How dare you accuse us of theft? After everything we've done for you? Mom's eyes filled with tears, the same weapon she'd used on me countless times before. Callie, honey, you're twisting everything. We were trying to help Dad during his medical crisis. But Nathaniel's reaction surprised me. Instead of jumping to their defense, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. Finally grew a backbone, did you, little sister? His casual cruelty sparked something dangerous in my chest. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. Would you like to hear yourselves talking about me? Without waiting for an answer, I pressed play on the birthday recording. Their own voices filled the room, mocking my allergy, calling me dramatic and attention-seeking, laughing at my pain. Mom's face went white as she recognized her own words. You recorded us? In our own home? But I wasn't finished. I played clips from phone calls where they promised to fix my credit soon, emails where they minimized my concerns, and text messages where they called me ungrateful for questioning their financial decisions. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of their denials. By the time I finished, they sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that their careless cruelty had been captured forever. I have hours of this, years of documentation. You made me invisible, but I saw everything. The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd anticipated. Within 2 weeks of filing our initial paperwork, my parents received notification that they were being sued for identity theft, financial fraud, and emotional distress. Sarah had warned me that they'd probably try to contact me directly, but I wasn't prepared for the barrage of calls, texts, and emails that followed. Dad's messages were angry and threatening. You're destroying this family over money. I hope you're proud of yourself. Moms were manipulative and weepy. Please call me sweetheart. We can work this out as a family. Don't let lawyers tear us apart. But Nathaniel's response caught me off guard. Instead of anger or manipulation, he sent a single text. I always knew you had it in you. His words haunted me. Did he respect me more now that I was fighting back? Had he been testing me all these years, waiting for me to grow a spine? Or was he just enjoying the chaos I'd unleashed? I realized I didn't care about his approval anymore. This wasn't about impressing anyone or gaining acceptance. It was about survival and justice. The court date was set for December 15th. Sarah was confident we'd win, but she warned me that victory would come at a cost. She said, they'll probably never speak to you again. I thought about that for a long time, trying to feel sad about losing my family. Instead, all I felt was relief. Some families are worth fighting for. Others are worth fighting against.
The courthouse was smaller than I'd expected and oddly peaceful despite the life-changing drama about to unfold inside. I sat with Sarah at the plaintiff's table, watching my parents enter with their lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a suit that probably cost more than my semester tuition. They wouldn't make eye contact with me, but I studied their faces carefully. Dad looked older, grayer, diminished by the weight of his lies being exposed. Mom clutched her purse like a lifeline. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes. Nathaniel was not there. I'd wondered if he'd show up to support them or simply to watch the drama unfold, but apparently even he had limits on his involvement in the family destruction. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed our evidence methodically, the forged documents, the timeline of financial manipulation, and the recordings of their cruel treatment. When my parents' lawyer tried to argue that I'd signed everything willingly, the judge cut him off. Signing under false pretenses after emotional manipulation doesn't constitute informed consent, she said firmly. The ruling was swift and decisive. All debts removed from my name, damages awarded for emotional distress, and a restraining order preventing them from using my identity financially ever again. As the gavel fell, I felt a weight lift from my chest that I'd been carrying for years. Justice wasn't everything, but it was enough. 6 months after the court victory, I received an unexpected phone call from Nathaniel. I almost didn't answer. Our family's number was still blocked on my phone, but curiosity won out. His voice was different, subdued in a way I'd never heard before. "Callie, it's me. Can we talk?" Part of me wanted to hang up immediately, but another part needed to hear what he had to say. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown, both of us awkward and uncertain. He looked older, worn down by something I couldn't identify. For the first time in our lives, I held all the power in our dynamic. He said, "I wanted to apologize." He stared into his coffee cup. "For everything. The party rumors, the notebook, all of it." His words should have felt like victory, but instead they left me empty. "Why now?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time before answering. "Because I realized you were always the strong one. You just hid it better than the rest of us." He admitted that he'd been jealous of my independence, my ability to succeed without needing constant validation. "You never needed anyone," he said with something that might have been admiration. "I always knew you'd be okay no matter what happened to the family." But I wasn't interested in his psychological analysis or his belated respect. I told him, "You're right, I am okay, and I'll continue to be okay without any of you." He nodded like he had expected that response. As I walked away from the coffee shop, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't necessary for healing. 2 years later, I graduated college debt-free for the first time since high school. The settlement money had covered my remaining tuition, and I'd built up a healthy savings account from my campus jobs. My final journalism project was a long-form investigative piece about financial abuse in families, a topic I understood better than most. My professor called it powerful and necessary work and encouraged me to submit it for publication. Standing in my cap and gown, surrounded by classmates celebrating with their families, I felt a moment of sadness for what I'd lost. But it was quickly replaced by pride for what I'd gained: independence, self-respect, and the knowledge that I could survive anything. Lisa from the bookstore came to my graduation, beaming like a proud parent. "You did it," she whispered as we hugged afterwards. "You saved yourself." That evening, alone in my apartment, I received an unexpected email from a women's magazine interested in publishing my story about family financial abuse. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to use my real name and photo. For the first time since this all began, I hesitated. Going public would mean admitting to the world that my family had betrayed me so completely, but it also meant that other people trapped in similar situations might see a way out. I typed my response without hesitation. Yes. Use my real name. Some stories need to be told. The magazine article went viral within hours of publication. My inbox flooded with messages from strangers sharing their own stories of family betrayal, financial manipulation, and systematic emotional abuse. Many had never told anyone before, carrying their shame and confusion in silence just like I had. Reading their messages broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. A young man named David wrote about parents who'd ruined his credit by taking out loans in his name for his brother's drug rehab. A woman named Maria shared how her family had manipulated her into signing over her inheritance to pay for her father's gambling debts. Their stories were different, but the pattern was identical: loving families that turned predatory when money was involved. I started responding to every message personally, sharing resources Sarah had given me and offering emotional support to people who felt as trapped as I once had. Within a month, I'd connected dozens of victims with legal aid organizations and support groups. The response was so overwhelming that I created a website dedicated to helping adult children recognize and escape family financial abuse. 6 months later, a book publisher reached out about expanding my story into a full memoir. The advance they offered was more money than I'd ever imagined having, but the real reward was the messages from people who'd found the courage to fight back after reading about my journey. Survival, I learned, was only the first step. The second step was helping others survive too. 5 years have passed since I last spoke to my parents. I occasionally hear updates through mutual acquaintances. Dad's health remains poor, Mom has become somewhat of a recluse, and they've moved to a smaller house across town. The gossip network in our old neighborhood apparently had a field day with the court case, and my parents never recovered their pristine reputation. I try to feel sorry for them, but mostly I feel nothing at all. That's probably healthier than hatred or continued anger. My life now is everything I dreamed of in that stolen notebook from high school. I work as an investigative journalist for a national magazine specializing in stories about vulnerable people fighting powerful systems. My apartment is small, but filled with sunlight, books, and the kind of peace that can only come from living authentically. I've never married or had children, but I have chosen family in the form of close friends who celebrate my victories and comfort me during difficult times. Last month, I received a wedding invitation from Nathaniel. Apparently, he's marrying someone I've never met and starting fresh in another state. I threw the invitation away without opening it fully. Some bridges, once burned, should stay destroyed. The book publisher wants a sequel focusing on my recovery and advocacy work. I'm considering it, not for the money, but because I've learned that stories have power. The right story, told at the right time, can save someone's life. Mine certainly saved mine. Yesterday, I was grocery shopping when I saw Mom in the produce section. She looks smaller than I remembered, her hair more gray than brown now, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear. For a moment, we made eye contact across the oranges and apples. She opened her mouth like she might speak, and my heart clenched with unexpected emotion. Then I remembered the birthday cake I couldn't eat, the debt that nearly destroyed my future, the years of cruel laughter at my pain. I turned my cart around and walked away without a word. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands shaking slightly from the encounter. Part of me wondered what she might have said, whether she would have apologized or tried to justify their actions one more time. But I realized I didn't need to know. Her words couldn't change the past, and I'd built a future that no longer required her approval or understanding. That evening, I called Lisa to tell her about the grocery store encounter. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. I thought about it carefully before answering. "Free," I said, finally. "I feel free." And for the first time since this whole journey began, that was completely true. I didn't need their apology, their acknowledgement, or their love. I had built something better, a life where my voice mattered, where my pain was valid, where my truth could help others find their own strength. They tried to bury me in silence, but I grew roots in that dark place and emerged stronger than they ever imagined possible. The letters started arriving last month. Handwritten envelopes with familiar return addresses that I almost threw away unopened. Curiosity eventually won out, though I waited until I was emotionally prepared for whatever poison they might contain. Dad's letter was 3 pages of self-justification wrapped in apology language. "I'm sorry you felt hurt by our actions, but you have to understand we were desperate." Mom's was shorter, but more manipulative. I pray every night that God will soften your heart toward family. Neither took real responsibility for their actions or acknowledged the systematic nature of their betrayal. But buried in Mom's letter was information I hadn't expected. They were facing bankruptcy. Dad's medical bills had continued mounting, their house was in foreclosure, and they'd been forced to borrow money from relatives just to survive. Part of me felt a tinge of satisfaction at their financial karma, but mostly I felt nothing. Their suffering didn't erase mine, and their consequences didn't require my sympathy. I showed the letters to my therapist during our next session. "Do you want to respond?" she asked. I thought about all the responses I could craft. Angry, compassionate, indifferent, cruel. But ultimately, silence felt like the most powerful choice. They'd forced me into silence for years, making me invisible and voiceless. Now I was choosing silence as my final communication with them. Some stories end with reconciliation and healing. Others end with boundaries and peace. I chose peace. Today, I'm 31 years old, exactly the same age my mother was when she decided I wasn't worth her attention. I woke up in my sun-drenched apartment, made coffee in my favorite mug, and checked messages from friends wishing me happy birthday. This afternoon, I'm meeting Sarah, my former lawyer who's become a close friend, for lunch at a restaurant that doesn't serve anything I'm allergic to. Tonight, I'm treating myself to a movie and dinner alone, not because I have to, but because I want to. The contrast with that awful 21st birthday couldn't be sharper. Last week, a young woman named Jessica reached out through my website. Her family had manipulated her into co-signing multiple loans, and she was drowning in debt while they lived comfortably off her sacrifice. I spent 2 hours on the phone with her, sharing Sarah's contact information and walking her through the documentation process I'd learned so painfully. She said, "I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe I was just being ungrateful." I assured her that she wasn't crazy, that her family's behavior wasn't love, and that she deserved better. As I hung up, I felt that familiar surge of purpose that comes from turning pain into power. My family buried me in silence, expecting me to disappear quietly under the weight of their cruelty and manipulation. They underestimated the strength that grows in dark places, the determination that blooms from desperation. I didn't just survive their attempt to destroy me. I transformed their weapons into tools for helping others escape similar traps. Every person I help find their voice is another victory over the silence they tried to impose on me. The book my memoir spawned has now helped thousands of people recognize financial abuse within their own families. Universities use it in psychology and social work courses. Support groups read it together, finding solidarity in shared experience. Legal aid organizations keep copies in their waiting rooms. What started as my private documentation of family betrayal has become a public resource for anyone brave enough to fight back against those who claim to love them while systematically destroying them. Tomorrow, I start work on a new investigative series about elder abuse in nursing homes. The skills I learned documenting my own family's cruelty, meticulous record-keeping, emotional detachment, strategic revelation of truth have made me formidable at exposing institutional corruption. My editors joke that I'm relentless when pursuing stories about vulnerable people being exploited by those in power. They don't know that every investigation feels personal. Every victory feels like another nail in the coffin of the silence that once nearly killed me. I enjoyed this story. Make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also, check out other videos on the channel. We've got more interesting stories for you.